Welcome to the Best Boss Whisperer. I'm Danny Ceballos. Let's start with something that might challenge you. Grief is already in your workplace. Not someday, and not when someone dies, today. And if you're not naming it, well, it's costing you. In this episode, I'm joined by grief educator Suzanne Jabour, and we unpack why unacknowledged grief quietly erodes culture, engagement, and performance. And we'll explore 3 whispers every leader needs to hear. Make sure you're listening for them. The first one is grief is bigger than death. Number 2 is avoiding emotion doesn't make you strong. And number 3, a 2-minute acknowledgement can change everything. All right, here we go.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're going to define grief for us, not only at the personal level, but at the organizational effectiveness level. So, Suzanne, welcome. Is there anything that you want to tell us about the work that you do before we get into some Q&A?
What we really need to do around this topic is learn. So if you sense as we're talking, oh my gosh, like that makes so much sense. And why didn't I know that before? You just didn't know it before, right? We need to learn together. And, bless Maya Angelou, as we know better, we do better, right? So I'm here just to help you know better and do better and not to worry about, what you may feel like you didn't do as well as you would have liked in the past when you didn't know any better. And we can always make amends, right? There's always the opportunity to have a do-over. I always say to them, you can go back to that person. Why wouldn't you go back to them and say, oh my gosh, I was talking to this person or I was listening to this podcast, and now that I know what I could have done, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And what can I do for you now? Right?
Yeah.
We can always go back with our honesty, with our vulnerability, with our, real life.
Oh my God. I want to underscore this notion, an invitation to listeners, that the idea is to do the best you can do with what you have, with where you are right now. And once we recognize that we've done that, our parents have done that, people, if they're in their integrity, they're doing the best they can. And I bet you we all were, even if we look back and think I could have done that differently, to your point. So, it does, for me, it suggests the question, how do I invite people to talk about grief? And when I'm still figuring out how I talk about grief, that's the first question. And then, of course, the big question is, what does this have to do with workplaces? Tell me about how can leaders understand the importance of doing this work with their teams, with their organizations?
Yeah. So the first question, which was like, how can we start these conversations, is I think our gift comes from the broadening of the definition, right? If we really understand that grief happens from all loss and that all change brings loss. So if all change brings loss, all loss brings grief, we're actually experiencing grief all the time. So the gift in understanding that is we can practice, we can flex this new muscle, we can get more comfortable around the smaller losses, right?
Yeah.
Because someone like me,
Yeah.
I come to this after the death of my son. So as a grieving mom grieving out loud, I'm not a good first assignment. I'm sure I was terrifying. And that's okay. I had to do what I had to do. Other people had to do what they had to do. It's all good. If we can practice around smaller losses, the loss of an opportunity, the loss of a job, the loss of a
Yeah.
relationship, there's so many around us that are big losses in our life, big ruptures that happen. We can practice there so that when it's a loss of a loved one, when it's one of the big ones, we've got a few sentences maybe that we've tried before, right? We've got a mindset we've tried before. We understand that when our heart is racing and we feel uncomfortable, it's okay, right? So that's one of the ways we can start to talk about it. And we can do that in organizations as well. So to kind of, as a segue into why leaders should care, I want to talk about how you can start to talk about it in the workplace, and then we'll get to why we care. What if the leader, because it has to come from the leader, no one is going to be more vulnerable or honest than the leader. So the leader needs to have some ability to say something like, we've restructured and that's a big deal. And I have a whole lot of feelings about it. And I bet you do too. And it's okay for us to express those. So for me, I'm feeling really excited for what this restructure can bring to us, sad for the people that we had to let go, concerned about the people that are here. I want to make sure you feel comfortable. You know that we are valued to us. You know that this restructure really is overall for our best possibility of a future, right? It's a future forward thinking
Yes.
decision. And if you have any feelings, let's just take a minute if you're comfortable, because we have to have safety first, right? No one's going to talk about this kind of stuff if they don't feel safe.
No,
Can't
exactly.
make people do it, right? So you have to have developed a culture of safety, all those things. That's where we start in my programming, right? We need to start with leadership and the culture of safety, because if that's not there, it's pretty tough for us to keep going. And then we go on from there,
Mhm,
because
mhm,
we've brought it
mhm.
into the room. We've said it's okay to have feelings about it. Even if you don't want to talk about it, at least you're allowed to have them and they're welcome here, right? We don't
Mhm.
expect you to be an automaton anymore. That's not the modern workplace. Why it matters is a bunch of different reasons. It matters because of how much it's costing you, right? The last study I could find really solid research about the cost, for those that look at sort of the bottom line aspect, was in 2003. And the grief index at that point calculated the cost of hidden grief in the workplace at $75 billion a year.
No kidding.
So
Wow.
just adjusted for inflation to 2023, it's 125 billion.
You
And
did
there
the
might have been this big rupture in our collective experience that makes that number probably too low, because there's way more grief around us now than there ever has been before, and we see it more. So from a money perspective, it's costing you money, right? It's costing in productivity. It's costing in engagement and retention. We have this whole new idea of presenteeism. Never mind that people aren't showing up. They're showing up so disconnected. They're there, but they're not really there. So there's a financial cost. And then what's really most important to me, and I think to many leaders, is the human cost. Grievers are in our workplaces, right? Whether it's the loss of a loved one that we might know about because they might have accessed our bereavement leave policy. 3 to 5 days is the average. I'm here to tell you that's not enough for anybody. They're back when they're in acute grief. They're in survival mode and they're in your workplace.
Ay, ay,
And
ay.
if you don't know how to even acknowledge that loss in a healthy, appropriate way, you're already starting to lose them. These are
That's
valued members of your team that are struggling in your workplace, and we don't even know it because we're so far behind in this knowledge and this conversation. We're not even having the conversation to find out.
really good business case. Yep. Yeah, so what would that look like then? What would that look like, in its simplest form? So I have somebody on my team that's coming back after just their few days of loss, and they're in there. What should I do? I mean, is it as easy as saying, "I hear you, I feel you, I see you, how you doing?"
So, would they like you? First of all, the telling is impossibly difficult. When you have just lost someone and you have to keep telling people about your loss, it's unspeakably hard. Could you tell everyone for them? Would that be helpful? Is a great question before they have come back. We need to find that kind of, middle ground, and it all needs to be led by the griever.
Yeah,
So we don't
yeah.
get to decide anything for them, because that's the other thing that I hear is even in organizations that are, with the best of intentions are saying, wow, let's take some tasks off your plate, which certainly is something you could offer. They're doing it without consultation. They're doing it without a plan to put those tasks back on. And often they're taking away the tasks the person really loves. So don't take away the thing they like the most, right? Take away the stuff that's peripheral and can easily be done by someone else. It all has to happen as a conversation. So the offers of support need to
Yeah,
be really practical,
yes.
right?
Okay.
Because the griever and so that's why so many people with the best of intentions and the fullest of love say, oh my gosh, anything you need, give me a call,
Exactly.
right? And supervisors and bosses will say, anything we can do for you, we 100% support you. That's brilliant. That's an excellent first sentence. But the problem for the griever, especially in that acute phase, in that survival mode phase, is that they can't conceptualize what might be helpful.
Right, right, right.
My brain is too busy. It's doing all kinds of other things. I don't even know how I'm going to get through the day or the moment. So specific offers, and that's part of what I love doing with organizations, is coming up with a policy, first of all. So this is all actually formalized somewhere. And coming up with the best description I can come up with is it's a menu. It's a menu of supports that we can offer you. Which of these would be helpful to you this week? Do you
Mhm,
need flex time, for example? Would that be
mhm,
helpful? Is there some tasks that we can offload from you at the moment,
mhm,
right? Just for now. And then
mhm,
you need a follow up plan, right?
mhm.
So if you can scaffold that, if you can, and it's so easy now with technology, there's no reason you can't have a shared document on a drive of some sort, someplace where that's all set out, where we're checking in and we're going, oh yeah, check box, I've done that. Great. What's next?
Mhm,
I can
mhm,
do that as a griever. I can go down a list.
mhm, mhm.
And what's exciting about this work to me is the ripple effects are so beautiful. The ripple effect of supporting someone who's struggling with grief is that your team sees that you really care, that someone who's struggling is getting supported, and that then creates this culture of support, this culture of care, this culture of connection to what you were speaking about before, right? We're all wanting to build connection. You're building that connection by saying, yeah, we care about you. What can we do as a group? To me, that's compassion. Most of us have moved from sympathy, I'm sorry for you, to
Mhm.
empathy, right? I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. We want to take the next step to compassion. Compassion to me is empathy in action.
Oh,
I'm
great.
doing
Yeah.
my best to understand what you might be going through. Now, how can I help? How can I carry that burden with you? What can I do to alleviate the burden? And that's where the specific offers come in. Let's figure out what of it would be helpful to you right now. And then next week, let's talk about it again. Do we need to shift anything? Because we have this robust means of supporting you. And we're here for as long as it takes, right? The studies have shown that productivity drops to about 70% for that first 6 months ish. And this is a continuum, right? It's back up to 90, which I don't think any of us are operating at 100. 90 is probably about as good as it gets by the
Period. Yeah.
first year, right?
Okay.
So we're going to need some high levels of support for about the first 3 to 6 months. The next 6 months, you're not likely going to need any support at all. And your productivity is going to build over time just as you get more reconnected. You're able to self regulate better. You're less overwhelmed by your own personal experience. So we're not talking about supporting people for a long time. And we're talking for the most part about things that are cost neutral or very low cost. Like we all have this software. We've all got a suite of software that will do everything I'm talking about. We all have someone on the team that cares enough to take on a little bit of an extra load for the short term. We're surrounded by people who want to help us. They just don't know how. So if the organization puts together the how, people will step in.
I love that. Yeah. My takeaway from all that is, that the griever may not be able to identify what they want or need, but when I have some agency and you give me choices, there's a little bit of control that I have there a little bit. So I love that. Suzanne, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me, Danny.
So here's what I hope you take from this conversation. Whisper number one: grief is not an interruption to work, it is part of work. Whisper number two: you don't need the perfect words, you need presence. And whisper number three: culture shifts in moments, not in policies. If this episode challenged you, good. That means you're growing. And if you want to help building a leadership culture that can handle hard things without losing performance, you'll find resources in the show notes. This is the Best Boss Whisperer. Small whispers and big breakthroughs. We'll see you next time.